Good morning. How are you all doing today? Good. Welcome to this session on connecting continents, empowering transition, the promise of OSOWOG as a new blueprint for a net zero world, where OSOWOG is not a bird, it's actually one sun, one world, one grid. We have today with us a slew of very accomplished panelists. The session would be structured that I will provide a short welcome address, and then we will hear from His Excellency Lord Adair Turner, who is the Chair of Energy Transitions Commission, followed by Mr. Luciano Martini, who is the Chair of Clean Energy Ministerial's ISGAN initiative. And then I'll make a small presentation on what is the real potential of One Sun, One World, One Grid. And then we will have a panel discussion where we will have a lot of luminaries in addition to Lord Turner and Luciano joining from India on a virtual basis, Mr. Ghanshyam Prasad, who's chairperson of Central Electricity Authority, India, Mr. S.R. Narasimhan, ex-chairman and managing director of Grid Control of India. He's also the ex-president of Geo15, and Mr. Nasir Al-Shahrani, chief operations officer of GCC Interconnection Authority, and finally Mr. James K. Wahogo, Secretary General of East African Power Pool. We'll see if we are able to get him. So with that, I will just quickly make an opening address. Perhaps I can make it from here itself. Welcome to this session. Now, let us say that why are we here? Because as more countries have started expanding on solar, they are experiencing problems on grid stability. They also are looking at big storage investments. And as light of that, the regional interconnections connecting countries with transmission lines, connecting continents across subsea cables has suddenly become very viable. The benefits are you have a large-scale clean energy deployment where it is extremely cheap, like Saudi Arabia and UAE, to actually transport that power to India or Europe. Optimum resource utilization, because then you can utilize your assets. When the sun is running in some countries, it is night time in other countries. Often then you all put on your air conditioners in the night. So it allows trade to be done without having a lot of battery investments transporting power from one side. And as a lot of you might recall, the GGI OSOWOG initiative was launched at COP in Glasgow, COP26. And we are very pleased to report that this year, as part of our assembly, which is 137 countries with 550 participants, we had a new secretariat on One Sun, One World, One Grid that was established. So wonderful to have all of you together. Our vision is that One Sun, One World, One Grid will bring all the clean energy flowing across all our member countries. With that introduction, let me please invite His Excellency Lord Adair Turner to give a special address on a report that ETC had really commissioned on connecting the world, long-distance transmission as a key enabler of zero-carbon economy. Dr. Turner, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ashish. Is this working? Yep. Good. So I am the chair of the Energy Transitions Commission, which is a global coalition of companies and also some organizations, non-company organizations, including, I'm very pleased to say, the International Solar Alliance have now become a member of the ETC. We have members from China, from India, from Australia, from Europe, from Canada. And what we do is we look at all the technologies which can get us to a zero carbon economy by mid-century across the world. So we are looking at how to decarbonize cement and steel and chemicals and road transport and buildings. And there are many, many technologies required to do that. But it is true to say that the single most important technology is always electricity. Electricity is 70 or 80% of how we get to a zero carbon economy, is electrify, 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 and make sure that we produce all our electricity in a zero carbon fashion. And that is why this year we had a very strong focus on power sector transformation across the world. And we produced a major report in July about how to run power systems with very high levels of renewables within them. Now, across most of the world today, the cheapest way to produce a kilowatt hour of electricity is to use either sunshine or wind, depending on the natural resource of the environment. And indeed, the question of how to generate electricity in a clean, cheap fashion is no longer an interesting one because we know the answer. But the really interesting question in power systems across the world is, what do we do when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine? How do you balance a system across seconds, minutes, days, weeks, years? How do you balance energy supply, electricity supply, and electricity demand in a system where we will get most of our electricity from variable renewables, wind and solar? So in our report on power sector transformation, we asked the question, would we be able to run systems which were as much as 70 to 80% dependent on variable renewables, wind and solar? And we looked at that question in 4 different climatic archetypes across the world. We looked at the UK and Northwest Europe, which will primarily depend for its electricity on offshore wind. We looked at India, which will get the majority of its electricity from solar. We looked at Spain as an intermediate case, not as sunny as India, also a fair amount of wind, but much sunnier than the UK and Northwest Europe. And we looked at China as an example of a country so large that it has many different climatic types. And we reached the conclusion that in all these different climatic types, it is possible to run systems which get 70 to 80% of their energy, their electricity, from solar and wind sources. There are many different ways in which you do that. A crucial one, of course, is storage, using many different energy storage devices, batteries, pumped hydro storage, hydrogen, compressed air. And we looked in detail at the economics of that. And one of the most remarkable developments which has occurred over the last 2 years is a dramatic fall in the cost of battery energy storage systems, which is making the combination of solar plus wind plus batteries incredibly economic. I was told just last night about the latest auction price within one of the Indian round-the-clock renewable auctions, and I was told 2.7 rupees per kilowatt hour, 3 cents per kilowatt hour to provide electricity on a round-the-clock basis. So storage is very important, but one implication of the collapsing cost of batteries is that it's going to be much cheaper to run renewable systems in what we call the global sun belt than the global wind belt. In countries which get the majority of their electricity from solar sources, and where the primary balancing problem is day to night rather than winter to summer, that is where round-the-clock electricity is going to be cheapest. And this is great news, for instance, for the potential economic development of Africa, which now faces the potential to develop clean electricity systems with very, very cheap electricity. So storage is key, but so too is demand-side flexibility. These are the techniques by which we help move demand away from particular times of the day. For instance, when people have electric vehicles, getting them to charge them when there is solar and wind supply, not when there isn't. There are opportunities, for instance, in heating and cooling homes, if they are well insulated, to shift the timing at which people use their electric heating or their air conditioning systems, so that it's not always at the time where everybody else is doing the same. And things like that can also help us deal with this problem of variability. But one additional tool is long-distance transmission lines, because long-distance transmission lines can reduce the cost of dealing with the variability of supply and demand in two ways. One, they can connect areas where solar or wind will be very cheap with areas where it will be more expensive. That includes, for instance, North Africa to Northwest Europe. Electricity from wind and solar is going to be much, much cheaper to produce in Morocco and Algeria and in Tunisia than it is in the Netherlands or Germany or the UK. So there is simply a cost arbitrage here of building long-distance transmission links from the places where electricity supply will be cheap to where it will be more expensive. But we can also use long-distance transmission to help this problem of balancing. For instance, linking areas of the world where they are in a slightly different time zone. If we link, for instance, India to the Gulf and Middle East area, where the sun sets 3 hours later, electricity from the Gulf can be supporting air conditioning in India 3 hours after the solar panels in India no longer have supply. And sometimes the links will do both of those simultaneously. When we talk about a link, for instance, from Morocco to the UK, it will both be a cost arbitrage. It is cheaper to produce electricity there, but there is also a non-correlation of the variability pattern. So the variability pattern of wind supply in North Sea is completely different from the variability pattern of wind on the coast of Morocco or solar on the coast of Morocco. And the more that you link countries with different solar and wind time variability patterns, the more that you increase the number of hours where there will be a natural relationship between the timing of supply and the timing of demand. So we therefore this year also produced a detailed report on the specific issue of long-distance transmission. And we called it, as you've said, Connecting the World, long-distance transmission as an enabler of a low-carbon, of a zero-carbon global economy. We looked at all the technologies that are required. The key technology is high-voltage direct current, because when you transmit electricity over long distances, if you try and do that with an alternating current system, you will have large losses. So you go to what's called an HVDC system, which is much more efficient and cheaper for long-distance transmission. And we looked at the costs. The costs of these HVDC lines vary a great deal by individual circumstance. They vary according to whether we are talking about subsea cables, overground cables, or the most expensive, underground cables, i.e. cables going across land but having been put underground because people don't like the visual impact of them above ground. Actually, over longer distance, the cheapest are the subsea cables. The costs also vary according to terrain which you're going through. Much easier to do it over flat ground than over hilly, mountainous ground. And they vary according to the utilization rate, how much you have filled the cable. And that means that some of the most economic propositions are those ones which are simultaneously a cost arbitrage and a balancing mechanism, because then we tend to get the highest potential utilization rates. But to give you an idea of the cost, if you can get if your length of cable is above, say, 1,000 kilometers, and if it is 85% utilization, then you can think about what is the cost per 1,000 kilometers per megawatt hour carried. And that, we believe, is something like $3 to $10 per megawatt hour per 1,000 kilometers, which is 0.3 to 1 cent per kilowatt hour per 1,000 kilometers. So, for instance, Australia to Singapore or Morocco to the UK, about 3,500 kilometers. If it was 1 cent per kilowatt hour per 1,000 kilometers, that's going to be 3.5 cents per kilometer to do the delivery of power. And if you compare the cost of generating power in Singapore versus Australia, or the cost in generating it in North Africa, Northwest Europe, that 3.5 cents per kilowatt hour to deliver the electricity still makes that an economic proposition. So in the report, finally, we did an analysis of where the biggest opportunities are. And if you look at your report, you'll see a map with a whole load of arrows on it. Some big thick arrows and some thinner arrows. What we did was a modeling exercise to try and illustrate where the biggest potential might be. Now, we began by saying, let's ignore the fact that we have some countries in the world which don't cooperate with other countries in the world. We have some countries in the world which are at war with one another. Let's just draw the map if we had a perfect world at peace. And that shows some very interesting ones which I don't think are credible in the foreseeable future, such as China linking to Korea or Japan. But I don't think we can see, at least in the next decade or so, Korea or Japan being willing to rely for their electricity supply on a link from China. But there are many which are politically as well as technically and economically credible. The Gulf to India, Vietnam down to Singapore, Australia up to Southeast Asia, North Africa through to Northwest Europe, West Africa, Morocco, Mauritania, down to Nigeria, very big population country. And when we look at the ones which are technically and economically possible, in total, in a world at peace and total cooperation, you could imagine 15% of all global power being transmitted internationally. That could be an economically rational thing to do, in addition to the very large role for long-distance transmission within big countries, within India or within China. And that international connectivity could, in principle, deliver $100 billion a year of savings versus a system in which we tried to get to a net zero power system, but without using international connection. So international connection is something which we should certainly investigate, even if we recognize political barriers, concerns about security. We get people saying, well, maybe your adversary might cut the cables, etc. That's a concern in Europe now. We've had communication cables cut in the Baltic in suspicious circumstances. But let's assume we want to try to maximize the opportunity wherever possible. How do we do it? The answer is we put it on the global agenda, which the ISA is doing here at COP. We encourage the multilateral developments of the Bank of the World to pay attention in it. We encourage all individual countries within their power system planning to think about the role of what international connectivity do. We recognize the need, if you want to do these, that you have to plan early. They take a long time to develop. And we address some issues which we currently have in supply chain constraints, for instance, on key items of equipment like the big transformers. So that is the program that we set out, and we're very glad to be here presenting it with the International Solar Alliance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lord Turner. That's so comprehensive. And we really hope that we will work with you jointly on a lot of advocacy needed to connect the world from Australia right up to Middle East with $100 billion of saving. Let me invite now Mr. Luciano Martini, who's chairing the Clean Energy Ministerial's ISGAN initiative. Luciano, tell us a little bit, from the Clean Energy Ministerial priorities, how do you see the grid modernization and transmission and regional interconnection?
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. And to Q, I think it's working. Maybe I have to stay just closer. Thank you. Yeah, and thank you to Director General Ashish from International Solar Alliance for inviting me to this panel. And also, I was so glad and love to listen to your inspiring speech and so knowledgeable about your report and everything. It's very important. So I'm Luciano Martini. I'm the chair of the ISGAN. ISGAN is one of the SAM initiative, the Clean Energy Ministerial. Is the International Smart Grid Action Network. So we combine together 27 countries from 5 different continents, and we look at modernization, decarbonization of the power sector, and power system is in particular. So I love talking about transmission and distribution, is our main background, and I can learn from you how transmission is important. So he mentioned many important aspects about storage, long-term interconnection. This is the key for our clean energy transition. And what I want to add is that the system that we are looking today already is evolving because of the high penetration of renewables we had already in our system, but we need a major transformation coming in the next decade. So we have a very ambitious goal by 2030, because some of the countries and many European Union, for example, have this goal of decarbonizing the system and our economy by 2050 becoming net zero. And the role of the energy system is key, because we are the enabler for increasing the amount of renewables that can be integrated in our system. There are already examples about 70%, 80%, and we are looking further to have this demonstration of solution that can allow this high penetration to happen. And when we look at the system, there is a major keyword that we are addressing, that is system flexibility. So system flexibility is exactly what we have to expand in order to allow more and more renewable to be integrated. And we look to all possible sources of flexibility, from generation, so flexibility provided by renewables by themselves, but also interconnection. This is a great solution for increasing flexibility by all means. And we also look at the whole system in ISGAN, because we look also at distribution system as well. In this case, we also have some great potential from demand response. So using some flexibility is coming from the load itself, making the load using the energy when it's freely available, when the sun is shining, for example, and reducing the load when we have this dark curve that is happening during the evening. It's important to say that securing renewable from part where the solar resource is so generous is important. So I like example of connecting North Africa with Italy. Italy is like a peninsula that is a hub for Europe. So I think it's good to mention an important interconnection that is called Elmed, that is connecting Tunisia and Italy. It's a very important project that is supported by European Union as well. It's quite challenging. It's already under construction. The construction is starting now. Is a connection length is about 200 kilometers. It's a submarine cables of 500 kV DC, as you said properly, and it's a 600 megawatt of power that can be securing the exchange of power from Tunisia to the rest of Europe. So these are examples of interconnection that are very much needed to link the world, to make the clean energy transition not only possible but easier. And our goal is really to look at all the challenges of a transmission and distribution network. And I can mention a few of them. In Europe, we are also looking about hydrogen as an energy vector. Producing hydrogen with electrolyzer means that you have a large load increasing because of electrolyzer. And there is a new baby now that is a data center. So you know that there is an enormous request of a data center for managing AI, artificial intelligence. For example, in Italy, in my region, we have a lot of requests, like 10 gigawatt of a new load coming from data center. These are challenges that are very much impacting the transmission network, and having a more interconnected world, a pan-European and also a link with the North Africa is a solution to keep the system stable, reliable and efficient. So I really like this kind of discussion, And as ISCAN, we are at your disposal to be fully connected. I want to mention that I was in Glasgow at COP26 when Green Grid Initiative and you joined forces. That is where I approach interconnecting, collaborating to accelerate the transition. And more than that, I was also in Goa when the high-level discussion took place about One Sun, One World, One Grid, contributing to the discussion and making ourselves available for future collaboration. So we are here not only to listen, not only to speak, but also to collaborate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luciano. So I have a small presentation because as you heard the call of action from Lord Turner and Luciano, I think for some time we have been talking about the benefits,
I like it so much.
but it's time that we actually move to action. And therefore, I am going to make a brief presentation and then we'll have experts from India and GCC joining us as well. We all know that the world needs to electrify, and that is going to be very important. And the number of countries who have signed the net zero pledges require a huge investments in renewable. We are talking of tripling of renewable energy investments and the amount of energy that is needed. The cost of inaction is huge. The climate impacts are almost $38 trillion. And I think the figure there is not million, it's actually billion. The world is investing about 300 billion in 21, but they need to actually double it to at least 630 billion and move to 830 billion. But what I want to talk about is, this is how the world operates today. There are already regional power pools in Africa where I worked a lot. There are 4, East Africa, Central Africa, West Africa, and South. Then there is a whole GCC, which is getting increasingly interconnected. India has got interconnections now to Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, and also to Myanmar with plan to Sri Lanka. We'll hear from Mr. Ghansham Prasad regarding it. And then, of course, there are interconnections working in Europe, where Europe is an integrated grid, and obviously the interconnection possibilities. So this is where the world works. The idea is, of course, as you have heard from all the distinguished speakers, the prioritization of which are the most important interconnection nodes that must be pursued by building the coalition of countries is now our key work program going forward. Now, this, just to mention the potential benefits, if you look at the curve, you will see how the daylight peaks in different time zones depending where you are. So as we all know, the sun never sets. You could be trading power between each other. As I mentioned, there's resource complementary, the avoidance of huge investments in storage. So all of those potential benefits are known. I want to focus on what are the next steps. Because when we launched the Secretariat, the whole idea is to now move from ambition to action. We are undertaking a study by which the phase 2 will translate into, as Lord Turner talked about, certain priority nodes of connecting, say, Australia to Indonesia and Singapore, Singapore to India, India to Middle East, Middle East to Africa and Europe. But within each of them, there will be priority 2-3 regional interconnections that are being identified. And then there will be a need for actual pre-feasibility of these interconnections. But more importantly, as I've done interconnections across continents, the most difficult questions are, how will you create an institutional structure for operation of these interconnections? Will it be a joint venture? Will it be a separate company? Who will own what assets? How will the market trading be integrated across continents? Because the markets, the technical standards are different across countries. And finally, how will you finance it? Because often you will need to take very innovative financing structures as well. That will be the future next 2 or 3 years that we are going to work on. For example, some of the interconnections are that are happening are Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and South Africa power pool in Saudi Arabia. The India is already getting, as I told you already, connected with Bangladesh, Bhutan and Nepal, with the connection of Sri Lanka happening. It sits in the middle, which means the power can easily flow from the cheapest solar in Saudi Arabia and UAE via India to the ASEAN power grid, where there are a lot of interconnections that are being prioritized, as we heard in the Singapore week, that this is going to be one of the key priorities. This is just an illustration of what the potential is, how the power can flow from Indonesia to Thailand to Singapore, subsea cables going from India to Middle East, India to Andaman Nicobars right up to Singapore, Malay, and of course from GCC going right up to Europe. These are the details that are being worked about, and we'll have to work with whole host of partners. As I mentioned, this is our studies that are really going on. Our key activity in next year, since we have just launched the OSOWOG Secretariat, will be to create 2 or 3 international convening events along with partners and countries, 2 with priority nodes bringing countries together on figuring out what will be the next steps on financing, institutional structures and knowledge sharing, market standards, regulators, and 1 on a much larger international scale, because this will require a huge political approval process at the highest level for some of these interconnections to happen. So that was just a big summary. A lot of work to follow over the next 2-3 years. This just leads me to a little bit of a moderated discussion that we wanted to do over next 25 minutes. I am going to invite Mr. Ghanshyam Prasad, who's connected. Mr. Ghanshyam Prasad, can you hear us well?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, we can't hear you.
I can hear you. I can hear everyone.
Now we can hear you very well. Welcome, and we would have loved to have you here next time for sure. Mr. Ghanshyam Prasad has been instrumental in all the interconnections that India has had, multiple ones with Nepal, Bhutan and Bangladesh. So my question to you, Mr. Prasad, is tell us a little bit about what are the difficulties and challenges on the regional interconnections, and based on that experience of India's interconnections, how would you envisage some of the big, ambitious cross-continental regional interconnections that are being spoken about? What would a future look like? Over to you, please.
Thank you and good morning to all. I wish I could have been there in person so that better interaction could have happened face to face. But still, I am happy to be invited to be a part of this particular session. And more happier, particularly the manner in which ISA is taking forward the initiatives that was done by Central Electricity Authority a few years back. We had been working on One Sun, One World, One Grid for quite some time. And in last G20 meeting in India, we had presented our report as well. Thank you, Ashish, for showing some of the pictures of that report, and where the India is sitting in the center and trying to finalize some of the more interconnections with other countries as well. Regarding the enablers for all these interconnections, I must say that the energy transition push, which is being made by the COP as well as all other international forums, India is pushing the energy transition in a big way. And just to have small numbers, India has already crossed 50% of its installed capacity from the non-fossil fuel, and which is primarily coming from the solar and wind. So what we have realized is the moment you try to push solar and wind, there are challenges, as has been mentioned by the 2 esteemed speakers prior to me. And it was beautifully explained that what are the challenges and what you need to resolve those challenges as well. Similar things we have been facing in India as well, and we have been trying to resolve them to our best of efforts. But in doing so, the future challenges are more difficult for India because we are going to increase our electricity share from 22% to 45% in the energy basket, overall energy basket itself. The moment I do that, my demand grows somewhere around 7 to 8% over a period of time. And that means I need huge amount of electricity, and that to green power. And production is not an issue, but the issue becomes, the challenging part becomes the variability part and the balancing part, for which I'll be requiring huge amount of storage capacities. To deal with that, we have started with the hydro pump storage push and hydro capacity as well. But that, and also the battery energy storage systems may or may not be sufficient, and that is how we are trying to see that can interconnection also help us. Within India itself, we have a diversity factor of around 5%, and which leads us to a good savings in terms of the time differentials and the seasonal variations. But if I connect it with Southeast Asia, South Asia, and going towards the GCC, some of the lines which we are under discussions are with UAE and Saudi Arabia. Towards the GCC side, and towards the Southeast Asia, we are in touch with Thailand, which you have shown, and Singapore as well. And Singapore in turns is also in talk with Australia, which was revealed during our Singapore Energy Week meetings with Singapore. But this means that coming from Australia to Southeast Asia, South Asia, and towards GCC, India will have an advantage of around at least 6 to 7 hours, which means that the storage requirement during the non-solar hours will reduce by a substantial amount. And this will also lead to the stability of the things. Coming back to the policy, in fact, let me tell you that when we went to Bhutan and we started promoting interconnection with Bhutan, there was no written policy between the two governments. And probably that was the best period, and we could push a number of projects in terms of generation and the interconnections. And the moment we started making some kind of a guidelines, some kind of a rules, regulations, policies, then a number of more teething troubles started coming, that this can be approved, this cannot be approved, this is so, this is not so. So many a times what happens is hardcore policy also becomes a problematic affair. But then nevertheless, we do have a cross-border general guidelines for trade of electricity between India and other countries. And that we are religiously following with them, even though there are certain differences in terms of grid code, etc., etc. But still, by sitting together, we are able to resolve and arrive at a common consensus for operation of these lines, for building of these lines. Since as on date, we have more than 10 good interconnections of high voltage interconnections, 400 kV and of that order. And these are built in a different models as well. So we have the experience of building under the government to government negotiations, under the joint ventures, under the private sector participations. So all kinds of models are available with us, and we have built these transmission lines. Even some of the dedicated lines are also there, wherein the other countries, particularly with Bangladesh, we have a model wherein the entire power station has already been connected to Bangladesh, and that grid is not connected to India. So we have multiple variations, multiple cases which have been experimented, and we found that no one type of a solution exists, but depends on the situation to situation. We should try to experiment, and we should try to take it forward. Of course, the moment we try to link the Southeast Asia through the sea route, the challenges which have been mentioned by our previous speaker is very valid, because we have been also in touch with subsea cable manufacturers, the HVDC manufacturers. Incidentally, there are only 2 as of now, and they are also monopolizing with respect to their own technologies. This is going to be a bigger challenge as we go along with the energy transition, as well as whether it is the case of interconnections with other countries as well. But then we are trying to find some solutions to see that the supply chain doesn't get disrupted, and we don't get carried away by the high cost of HVDC systems. Second challenging aspect definitely is the depth of sea at certain locations, particularly the moment you try to move towards uh, Singapore or towards the Australia side. Some places the depth is as high as 3 kilometers, roughly 3,000 meters. But good news is that some of the cable manufacturers, they have confirmed that they have already tested the cables even up to this depth, and that has given a bigger confidence, and that is how we are going to proceed with some of the lines which we will be going ahead. So even though the challenges are there, and as you know that India is also pushing towards the data centers, green hydrogen, and our we are trying to see that our industry and the commercial establishments, they go green as quickly as possible. So all these will be will can happen if and only if we have larger amount of renewables in the country, and also try to manage. More important is managing the non-solar hours effectively and supply green power to all the customers. So this is some of the things that I thought Ashish, I'll share with the audience today, and the manner in which we are trying to make. We already have a plan, future plans for some of the countries, particularly India, Bhutan. We have a plan up to 2040. What are the next interconnections that is likely to come? With Nepal also, we have up to 2040. And other countries, we are trying to see that the earlier plans gets modified to a longer horizon, so that at least there is a visibility and we have a pipeline of projects among the other countries as well. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ashish.
Thank you so much, Mr. Prasad. So you have heard from Mr. Prasad, who was responsible for planning and the entire strategy of regional interconnections of India and South Asia. Now let's hear from Mr. Narasimhan, who managed the entire grid system operations of India. As you know, it's a very large system, now 500 gigawatts. Mr. Narasimhan, if I can go to you now, and you can mention what were the challenges in integrating the regional interconnections on the system operation, and if you can use your experience to also tell us that if this goes to much broader ambitions that we have been discussing today, of all the regions getting interconnected, what are the challenges from a system operation perspective that the system should plan for? Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ashish Khanna, for having me on this panel. So actually, as a system operator, I sincerely hope that political traction we would get and all this OSOWOG becomes a reality. Because actually it's quite easy, we have a lot of examples of successful interconnections already operating. The ENTSO is there, the GCC interconnection is there, South African power pool, and the emerging Asia-Africa links, they are all there. So we have a model already in place. So I would look at, the challenges which we faced, and going forward, we need to take this. The first and foremost, when we start interconnecting countries of this order as OSOWOG, coordinated transmission planning becomes very important. Because what would happen is that when we interconnect two countries, like lot of transmission constraints within a country would also get manifested, because essentially we are integrating the electricity markets between these countries. There would be economic transfers between the countries, and that could lead to some amount of congestion within a country as well. So apart from the cross-border links, we might need to also augment some of the intra-country links also, so that the system is reliable and more economic transfers can take place.
You got muted, Mr. Narasimhan.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So as I was mentioning, even in case of India, when we started interconnecting the regions within the country, we had 5 regional grids. When we started interconnecting, we experienced the same problem. Had to do a lot of augmentation within the region. And so it becomes more. The vulnerabilities have also increased. What is the single largest contingency which we would need to handle? So all that should be part of the coordinated transmission planning exercise. The second issue is which would be important is that policy and regulatory harmonization. We need common network codes. We have the example of the EU network codes, which is adopted at the EU level. And there's some amount of small flexibility given to the individual transmission system operators. So we have that model already. So these guidelines would cover how we operate the system, how do we maintain reserves, frequency control, congestion management, all of that would be covered. And one important thing which we need to note, like we are emphasizing a lot on HVDC connections. Now, HVDC connections do have some very good technical features like frequency controller, power oscillation damping, which is not much attention is paid to these finer controls available in HVDC. It's time that the network codes should incorporate all of that so that even when we have HVDC, we have all these features available. So the third thing which I would emphasize is that operating procedures and real-time coordination. That also becomes very important. The real-time data visibility, you should have some visibility of your neighbors also. With India, we have connections with Bhutan, Bangladesh, and Nepal. So real-time data flow is also very important so that situational awareness is there in real time. And the coordination, these procedures become very important. We with so much of negativity around the Spanish blackout on 28th April 25. But I see one positive thing. The interconnections have played a very major role. The Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia system that could survive, and Spain system could be revived very fast because of supply from Morocco. So that's a very good success, which I feel that must be highlighted. The advantage of these interconnections. The fourth, of course, is governance and trust architecture. I think in your presentation also, you mentioned, what should be the model that we should follow. In continental Europe, we have Chorizo as one institution. In western part of Europe, that 5 or 6 countries, they have a visibility at that level. So similarly, as OSOWOG develops further, we need to think of one super control center, maybe 3 or 4 regions, and then they would take care of coordinating operations between 5 or 6 countries. So that's essentially, these 4 areas become very important, and from experience, I can definitely. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Narasimhan. That was so much of practitioner inputs on the importance of network codes, grid stability, and your mention about the importance of regional interconnections impact on system reliability, as it happened in case of Spain, was very, very relevant. So thank you so much. Of course, there's a lot of work as soon as a lot of regional interconnections would need to be done. Now, after listening to South Asia, let's go to GCC. Mr. Nasir Al-Shehrani is Chief Operations Officer of GCC Interconnection Authority. Welcome, Mr. Nasir. It's so wonderful to have you join us, and hopefully we'll be able to have you next time in person. So, Mr. Al-Shehrani, tell us a little bit about the GCC interconnection. What have been the challenges for you in managing GCC interconnection, including on the business and financial models? And as you see this vision of connecting East Asia to South Asia to Middle East to Europe, what would be your perspective on having managed this interconnection? Over to you.
Good morning. Thank you for the
We are just trying to get a good volume, Mr. Al-Shairani. We can't hear you well here. Can you please go ahead again?
Can you hear me now?
Unfortunately, we can't hear you.
What about now? What about now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay, so good morning. Thank you for inviting me to this panel discussion, and glad to see some of all the friends here with us on the panel. So let me start with a sort of introduction. GCC Interconnection Authority started the interconnection between the GCC countries, 6 GCC countries back 2009. The interconnection start the operational phase. When it comes to GCC Interconnection Authority, the GCC member states decided to create a neutral body who's given the responsibility to build, own, and operate the interconnection. And since then, GCIA is running the interconnection between the 6 GCC states. It started with 4 member states that back 2009, then which is mainly Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, and Kuwait, and then UAE and Oman joined in 2011, and by that the 6 GCC states were interconnected through a super grid 400 kV network. It's a combination of AC network, back-to-back DC converter with Saudi grid, submarine cable to Bahrain. Now we are at the phase where we are expanding beyond GCC region. We will interconnect Iraq soon by let's say early 2026. Iraq will join. Also, Saudi Arabia will be connected with Egypt, and by that, the whole GCC region, plus Iraq and Jordan, and even also Egypt will be interconnected. So that is when it comes to let's say the network in general. Back to your question regarding let's say primary drivers for this grid. Mainly, it's to improve security and reliability. This is one of the main driver. You know, in our region, the growth on demand is significant. It ranges between 6 to 8% annually. And with having the interconnection as a backbone super grid between the GCC states, that's helped to improve the security and reliability. We have recorded over 3,000 incidents where the interconnection helped to provide support, mutual support between the grid. In the recent, let's say, a few years, we have seen the contribution of the interconnection for the RES fluctuation. We start feeling the pain of renewable. We have seen lots of intermittent generation, but with the help of the interconnection, with the help of storage, things are moving in the right direction. Again, one of the main driver for the interconnection is the economic efficiency and cost saving, where GCC interconnection so far helped member states to save up to $4 billion compared to the capital cost of 1.5 billion, with a projection of around 30 billion over the next 25 years in terms of saving. Now, when it comes to challenges, of course, we are facing the energy transition, and with the let's say ambitious target for renewable, again, integration of renewable is a challenge, but also it creates lots of opportunities. So we have to be ready for that, not only from a technical aspect, but also in terms of regulation, in terms of facilitation, in terms of policy making. Again, one of the challenges when we started interconnection was the primary objective of it is to provide emergency support, mutual support between the member states. However, you cannot just build this asset and you don't utilize it for other aspects. That's why we start pushing to create a market. And now GCCIA is considered like a market operator for the whole region. We have seen a significant growth into the energy trading volume and also into the market products. Now we are starting what they call it pilot project for ancillary service within the region, and we are expecting to have the result by end of next year. So that is in a brief when it comes to the GCC interconnection.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nasir Al-Sharani. I know in the interest of time, I'm just going to go to all the 5 panelists, requesting them in 20 seconds to say, because this is so futuristic, not futuristic, but it's going to take time. How should we define success in next 1 or 2 years? What would you like to see one thing that will define success in 1 or 2 years for OSOWOG? Lord Turner, I'm going to ask you to please come in first.
I think I'd like to see an agreement on 1, 2, or 3 of the highest potential links with the governments at either end or the combination of governments saying, yes, we're going to do it, we're going to make it happen, and beginning the process of actually implementing.
Thank you. Luciano?
Yeah, I think what is important is like improving long-term planning, because we need to do it properly, and then increase the certainty for investment. And then I'm also looking for solution for long duration energy storage.
Okay.
When you want to cover weeks and months and season, that is key.
Thank you. Mr. Ghanshyam Prasad.
I think what you are expecting is 2 to 3 interconnections. Probably India can provide all the 3 solutions to you. 1 to UAE, 1 to Saudi Arabia, and another to Singapore. All the 3 is likely to fructify in next 2 years.
Great. Mr. Narasimhan?
Yeah, so apart from the grid, that one sun also we must try to exploit. Currently, we have not harnessed all of it. Even in India, it's mainly in the western part. So one sun throughout this, that we must also harness.
Great. He's from a system operator. He's saying it should be more diffused. Mr. Nasir Al-Sharani, for you, success would look like what in 1 to 2 years?
Well, as they say, no transition without transmission. You have to have more interconnection, and you just mentioned about the let's say India to GCC country interconnection, but that can be even extended if you have like India, GCC, and even beyond to other Arab countries like Egypt and beyond to Morocco. Then you will not gain only 3 to 4 hours. You will gain around 6 to 7 hours in terms of sun. So you have to have the political will into that direction. So political will is a key requirement.
Thank you so much. So we heard get priority 2-3 interconnections, start working on long duration storage, make sure the sun has a lot more diffused power, and get the political will. So that is our marching orders. We'll continue to work with all of you. Thank you so much. I'm going to request Pankaj Khurana, who brought all of this together, to provide a brief word of thanks.
Thank you very much, DG, for giving me an opportunity. Good morning, good everyone in all the respective regions. On behalf of ISA, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our distinguished speakers, panelists, and participants for their invaluable contribution to today's discussion. We look forward to have much more. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's give them all a round of applause, please. And we hope that next time at COP, when we come with the session, we'll have one or two projects that we'll talk in detail. Thank you very much.